Hey, y'all, welcome to the Unleashed Performance Therapy Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Robert McNair. Our guest on the show today, Mark Abesamis. He's got his master's degree in sports science and exercise and sports science and sports nutrition. He is a registered dietitian, and I just recently learned that he has his certification in tactical strength and conditioning as a facilitator. Mark, how's it going this evening, man?
Hey, it's going good, Jamie. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, for sure. We've been wanting to do an episode about nutrition, and I remember that you were in school and you were talking to us about going for nutrition. And I see you're doing well and you've got your own thing set up. So you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, of course. So at that time, like Jamie was spoken, we were just talking, and I told him that I was going to school. To give y'all some background and clarity, I was going to the University of Alabama. I was working on my bachelor's in food and nutrition. I graduated in 2021, and since then, I just recently completed a massive of applied exercise science in sports nutrition. So during that program, I actually obtained the TSAC-F credential, which is the Tactical Strength and Conditioning Facilitator. And for those of y'all that don't know, it is a credential offered by the NSCA, which is the National Strength and Conditioning Association.
Okay, and what kind of things does that credential allow you to do? Because it sounds pretty cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. So tactical is pretty broad, and I've actually gotten a few job offers to be a tactical dietitian. So sometimes they'll be called performance dietitians. So basically, you work with like military personnel, anyone who's like tactical. So
Okay.
EMS, firefighters. So it's pretty broad, but it's really cool because I have a huge amount of respect for that. I've had at least two job offers in my years of being a dietitian already, but also having my
Okay.
own business, it's just right now I don't think it's the right time to go all in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what initially led you down the path to pursuing more knowledge on nutrition?
Man, I think that ever since I was young, I've always been fascinated about the importance of nutrition. I know that you're a huge, sports guy, and you like to work out, Jamie, and we'd be lying if we said that nutrition didn't play any component,
Mm-hmm.
in our performance, our recovery, how we feel.
Yeah,
Food
absolutely.
has such a huge role in performance, man, and I've always gravitated towards that.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think that people realize how important it is when they start exercising. You know, it's January, so people are hitting the gym hard on their New Year's resolutions. And I don't think that they realize how much nutrition, how big of a role nutrition plays on achieving their goals this New Year's. Um, so kind of bouncing off that, what do you feel like is the most common misconception for people in regards to nutrition?
Yeah, that's a very great question. There's a lot of myths out there, but Jamie and Robert, being you know people who are very educated, it just comes down to knowing where your sources are coming from. So like you can read something off of Google and then take it as the Bible. Like a lot of the people, they'll just Google a
Yeah.
question real quick and they'll be like, "Oh, okay, cool. This is what I'm gonna base my nutrition plan off of, or
Hmm.
whatever." It's kind of like y'all are in physical therapy, and so like y'all aren't gonna submit work that's cited from Google. Your teachers, it's not gonna fly with them.
Exactly.
They're gonna want peer-reviewed references. And with us, you're gonna look at the research as well, but then you're also gonna
Hmm.
look at the recommendations by the academy. And then there's so many other credible organizations. We already talked about NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning Association. I get some of my recommendations from them, and then other recommendations I'll get from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So it's just all about knowing your knowledge base and then knowing where credible information comes from. But yeah, there's so many
No,
misconceptions in nutrition.
Yeah, speaking on resources, of course, we're in an age where everything's at your fingertips. You got the Instagrams and the TikToks, and of course, everybody has these maybe say like fad diets and stuff like that. So I'm sure you run across some stuff that even with your knowledge, you're like, okay, they're on the right path, but that is completely wrong. Do you ever weigh in on some of those
Yeah, there's so
accounts?
much trash out there.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%, man. So Jamie and Robert, you guys are right. There's so much information out there. You're kind of scratching your head, like what is good, what is not, and what's in between. So it's just like anything else. I always like to use analogies to help people understand. But, y'all being from the field of physical therapy, I mean, you guys are gonna know what's credible information is based off the source it's coming from. And also, like I'm a man of faith, and so sometimes my pastor will be like, "Hey, don't trust what I'm saying for what it's worth. Look at what it says in the scripture." And so, like,
Mhm.
for us, man, is like how I check my facts is, looking at the research, but also looking at what the actual sources. So if someone's talking about something and says, "Hey, I got this little tidbit from the academy," but then they don't really memorize it right, or they weren't paying attention in school, you're gonna know. And it's just like, I guess, just knowing it, like the back of your hand, just knowing it so well to where, you feel comfortable giving out those recs and having those conversations. But truthfully, I try to not call people out. Like if I see someone like on TikTok, I don't have TikTok, but if I see someone on social media and I'm like, oh man, that guy's just feeding a bunch of garbage, I'll probably keep that to myself. But then between me and my friends, I'll be like, if he asks me, I'll tell him,
Yeah.
because nutrition is one of
Uh-huh.
those things, man. It's like, it's kind of like, politics nowadays, and I guess vaccination status. It's kind of a touchy subject. If you like, for example, I'm drinking green tea right now, and it's just one of those things where you can easily get in an argument. Once you get down to the sweetener that you're using, whether it's
Mhm.
sugar or artificial or nothing, people like will literally have fights based off nutrition. So I try to be as easygoing and laid back as much as possible.
No, I agree, man. There's so much crap on the internet, and I think that's another reason that I like having this podcast, because I want to provide a source of credible information for people who listen to the podcast, and so they can kind of weed out some of the crap that they see on Instagram and TikTok. Um, so kind of bouncing off of that, how do you feel about those fad diets? Kind of like keto. What's another one? They do the carnivore diet, and then they've got intermittent
Intermittent
fasting.
fasting, big.
Yeah. So how do you? What's your take on things like that?
And so, like, just talking about the Bible earlier, intermittent fasting is they didn't really call it intermittent fasting. It was just fasting, right? So, like, I guess going off of, like, I come from a background of clinical nutrition, and so just tying it into this, like, cancer is an umbrella term, pneumonia is an umbrella term, fasting is an umbrella term. So an umbrella term is like there's so many things that it can be, and then you can get very specific. Like for cancer, you can talk about esophageal cancer. That's very specific.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then go into fasting, you can talk about intermittent fasting, very specific, and then you have the ratios of intermittent fasting. But basically, is these are things that existed, in the biblical times, and it's just people are like giving it a different name. But at the end of the day, there's nothing new under the sun. It all existed, in the beginning, and so to me, I think intermittent fasting is it has a lot of spiritual context, but in terms of like weight loss and other health benefits, that's proven. That's historically proven.
Mm-hmm.
Now keto, I think keto is something that was taken out of context and just applied for weight loss. But at the end of the day, what keto is, it was created because people were having seizures. So it was created for epileptics, so people with seizure
Really?
disorders. Yeah, and so they found that it was effective in that type of population, specifically within the pediatric population. Now there is carryover into the adult population, but more specifically within the pediatric realm. And here's how keto works: is for those of you who don't understand, it's pretty much just eating a diet that's higher in fat and lower in carb. Now you can get very specific, but this is just like the expedited version of it. Not trying to confuse anyone. That's just what it is. And the reason why keto is so effective is because people don't understand that carbohydrate retains water. So whenever you're cutting out all these carbs, you're essentially limiting how much water your body can absorb. So, the studies will differ, but um, pretty much it's like 1 to 3 to 4 ratio of how much water is absorbed per carb. So, I mean, essentially, you're just losing a bunch of water weight when you're,
Mm-hmm.
just cutting out the carbs.
Okay. Okay. I think that in college, I kind of naturally was on an intermittent fast because I wouldn't eat anything till noon, and then I'd eat something right before bed, and then I'm just up. I'm too lazy to make something for breakfast, so I just wait till lunch. That's kind of
Yeah.
that's kind of how I was in college, and I felt good. I mean, I don't know if I had anything specific going on with my fitness, but it didn't. It felt fine, and I think that if I, as a personal trainer, if I ever recommended any kind of diet to anybody, I don't really like recommending diets because I feel like they're very short term and they're not something that can be sustainable. But something like intermittent fasting, people can sustain for a long time because it's sometimes they do it naturally and it's very easy to stick by it. So as a registered dietitian, I'm sure you've had a lot of different types of clients, uh, but the most that we see is people want to lose weight or people want to get bigger and gain muscle. So what differs between those types of nutrition plans for someone who wants to lose weight? If you were to build a plan for someone who wanted to lose weight versus you building a plan for someone who wanted to gain muscle, get bigger, and they're in the gym 3 to 5 times a week.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jamie. So it all goes back to what are the client's goals, and if you look at these goals, they're totally different. So, like it's we just passed all the holidays, right? And most people are bulking during this time for those who like to exercise. And sometimes we'll make jokes about the dirty bulk, right? But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, their goal is to create muscle. Now, whether we're talking about like the quality, the protein quality that they're ingesting and the overall food quality that they're getting, they don't really care. They just want to be gaining weight, and then basically what they're implying is everything that they consume is contributing towards just muscle mass, which is, not necessarily the case. But in terms of weight loss, it's so multifactorial, but it definitely starts with accountability. And I like to think of it as like checks and balances, looking at your bank account, whatever you got to do to have a visual of, you got to
Mm-hmm.
keep track of your finances, like if you're eating like 500 calories per item per product, I mean, you're just blowing through that. You're just swiping that credit card. You know what I mean? That should be a meal, not like a snack or, like a beverage. But sometimes
Yeah.
people are just straight up drinking their calories and they look at how much they're getting, like that Starbucks drink or, I'm not trying to
Hey.
shame anyone because I think life's all about balance. You know what I mean? But it also,
Uh-huh.
it comes down to accountability. Just like you're checking your bank account. People can't tell me, all right, they didn't buy that drink and then they're not checking their bank account at the end of the day or even after every transaction. Now, I'm not trying to say, eating disorders do exist, especially within the
Mm-hmm.
athletic population. So, not trying to trigger any of that, but you also can't just say that triggers me, so I'm not going to hold myself accountable in any way. You have to have accountability and responsibility, just like grades, right? As a student, you have to have performance outcomes, and one way to measure performance is to look at your grades. Now, you just can't say I'm going to neglect that because it triggers me and it causes stress and anxiety. Therefore, I'm not going to look at my grades. You just can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the same way with nutrition and your finances, you have to have a measure. So for weight loss, it starts with looking at what you're putting in. So if you're like averaging 500 calories per beverage or product or whatever, and then your meals are like 1,500 a meal, there's a good chance you're not going to lose weight. So
Mm-hmm.
and it's very multifactorial. So for someone who has a slow metabolism, I mean, you're just fighting an uphill battle there. Someone who, exercises a lot, has a fast metabolism, great genetics, it may not affect them, So I'm kind of leading into something that's called predictive energy equations. So there's many ways that you can predict energy, energy needs, predictive energy equations such as the Mifflin St. Jeor, Harris Benedict. Those are two ones that you can utilize. The research suggesting that Mifflin St. Jeor is more reliable, especially in the obese population. So for people who want to lose weight, such as the obese population, Mifflin St. Jeor is the more reliable predictive energy equation.
Okay. I haven't heard those in a long time. I think I studied those in my undergrad in my exercise physiology class. So it's I vaguely remember those equations. But I do think that it has a lot to do with how much lean body mass that you have. And that is a big component to being able to, have that fast metabolism and burn off more energy at rest. And I think that's one of the biggest things for people that are trying to lose weight. At least what I would say to them is that they need to pick up something heavy. They work out, get their muscle mass a little bit bigger, because someone with more muscle mass is going to burn more energy at rest than someone who doesn't have near as much. And so they're going to be able to lose weight easier than the other person. And so I always make sure to let them know that. On another note, I wanted to ask you, man. So we've talked to one of my good friends that's a boxer, and he runs half marathons. And so that got me thinking what his nutrition had to look like in order to run those half marathons, and other endurance athletes that run Ironmans and long Spartan races or full marathons. What would you recommend to someone that came to you and said, "Hey, I'm an endurance athlete. I need to know what I need to be fueling my body with to be the best and be competitive at this sport"?
Yeah, so I'm going to make it really simple. So you have glycogen. Glycogen is stored in your muscles and in your liver, mainly in your muscles. So your muscles can hold approximately 4 more times glycogen than your liver. So glycogen, you can get that from carbohydrates. And so you heard, most of y'all have heard of carb loading. So you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned like, endurance, like, marathons, those type of, things, those events. So these type of athletes are definitely going to be getting most of their energy from carbohydrates. So carbohydrates is our body's preferred source of energy. So at the biochemical level, it'll turn into glycogen, and I already mentioned where it's stored. So if
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at specific recommendations for aerobic endurance athletes, it's going to depend based off what you're reading. So one of the resources that I would like to utilize is the Gatorade. They have their own institute research, and one of their recommendations is 6 to 10 grams per kilogram
Okay.
for the moderate intensity, and then for those more heavy intensity, it's going to be 8 to 12 grams of carbs per kilogram. So for whatever reason, is we use kilograms as opposed to pounds. So just
Mm-hmm.
making it simple. If someone weighs 150 pounds, you would just convert their body weight to kilograms. So you do 150 pounds divided by 2.2, and then you would get your weight in kilograms. And then you would multiply that by the factor of 6 to 10 or 8 to 12 based on if you're moderate intensity endurance or heavy intensity endurance. So those athletes that you alluded to earlier who are doing those marathons, they're going to be on the higher end of that, which is the 8 to 12 grams per kilogram.
So it's a whole bunch of carbs.
It's a lot of carbs, man.
What does the research say about how, at what point in time before they do their event, how soon do they have to eat all these carbs? Like, people carb load before the event. And
Yeah.
does the research specify how early that has to be or how late that has to be?
Yeah, Jamie, that's a good question, and it's definitely been addressed. So nutrient timing is important. So it's just like cramming for an exam. If you look at something like 5 minutes before an exam, you really think you're going to retain that knowledge? 100% no. So just like what's funny is like you're not trying to make fun of anyone. It just goes back to knowing and doing your research and all that stuff. But if you see someone like drinking an energy drink and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just drinking this or I'm eating this, whatever it is, to utilize for energy for my next workout, that's not necessarily the case because nutrient timing is important. So this is I'm getting my information from the same research earlier. Gatorade Institute. Now they have their own research, and research overlaps with other credible outlets that I utilize. But research is showing 1 to 4 hours before an event, you're going to want 1 to 4 grams of carbs, um, right? You know, grams of carbs,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like a 1-to-1 ratio essentially. And so
Okay.
nutrient timing is huge. Now protein timing is huge too. So like you have that anabolic window of about 1 hour, right? You know, it'd be ideal if you can get protein into your body. You know, we're just talking about carbs, but you know we also have to talk about protein, another macronutrient.
Mm-hmm.
So just for those listening, we were talking about carbohydrates, a macronutrient, and now we're talking about protein as a macronutrient, and then the other macronutrient being fat, which we kind of talked about with keto. But talking about protein now, you know, for people who are eating like 60 to 75 grams of protein in one sitting, that's really inefficient. You know, there's a point of diminishing returns or a point to where something is just not even useful. Like it's just you're just wasting it because our body can
Yeah.
only utilize 20 to 30 grams of protein in one sitting, and that's spread out over ideally 3 hours. And so um, that's just how our body's designed. And so, you know, you're looking at an average of 25 grams of protein, you know, every 3 hours. And so, you know, timing is huge, is basically what I'm saying.
Is there a certain time for protein? Because I know like a lot of people will do like a post-workout drink or a post-workout um, protein shake, something like that. Is there a certain time to do your protein prior to your workout or following your workout?
Yeah, so mainly with recovery, Jamie, is what you're looking at protein. So before your workouts, you definitely don't want to eat a lot of protein, and the reason is because it can really slow down digestion. So things that are going to slow down digestion are protein, fat, and fiber. So if you're eating something that's high in fat, fiber, or protein, it's really going to slow down your digestion, and that's why it's not recommended. So that's why we don't really emphasize, you know, how much protein before. It's actually emphasized
Mm-hmm.
after, and mainly because of recovery. So the thing that really stimulates, everyone's heard of muscle protein synthesis. It's just one of those terms that's, you know, thrown out there. But, you know, what actually stimulates muscle protein synthesis is leucine. So leucine is one of the branched chain amino acids. There's only three of them. So leucine is one of those, and it's actually the one that stimulates muscle protein synthesis. The others being isoleucine and valine.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know.
And
So, go ahead.
back to the athletes, getting kind of a little bit more specific. Myself being the topic. So when I was playing soccer at a high level, and luckily I was blessed with those genetics and the high metabolisms and stuff. So I was like a garbage disposal. So whatever I was eating, of course, I was burning it off. But of course, there was at one point that I wanted to put on a little weight, but I always found it was just boring trying to get that like caloric intake, and you're just eating thousands and thousands of calories. And then I learned about like the empty calories, and there's stuff you can eat as much as you want, but it's not going to help you put on that weight, put on that muscle mass and stuff like that. So just kind of generic, not to go too deep into it. What's something that a soccer athlete with that does all these cardio exercises, stuff like that, where you're burning off stuff, what would you focus on more in a diet to try to put on a little weight?
Yeah, so great question. So where I would start with is I would start with the predictive energy equation to see, and it always takes into account their activity factor. So I think you know the beautiful thing about you know exercise is it's again I like using the word multifactorial because there's so many things that go into it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
nutrition is important, but then we have to take a step back and look at his activity factor. So some people are just you're talking about essentially his BMR, Robert, and so you know Jamie kind of alluded to this earlier. Some people just have such a fast metabolism that at rest, you know, your BMR, how much energy your body needs at rest. You know, these some people with a fast metabolism, you know, good genetics, you know, they're just burning through these calories, and BMR is, you know, what your body's doing just basically to survive. And this is over 24 hours. It's different from RMR. RMR takes into account activity factor. So this is kind of where I'm getting at. You know, we're going to use the predictive energy equation. We're going to take into account all the things that they're doing throughout the day. And then we're going to say, okay, If this guy is, this soccer player is, requiring about 3,000 calories, just to live day to day, perform all the daily activities he needs, but he's only getting like 2,000 calories, you know, he's going to have decreased performance. It's going to impact him negatively because number one, he's going to be low on energy. Calories, what it means is energy, right? So at the end of the day, calories provides energy, and then you can go further into that, looking at vitamins. So we know the B vitamins provide energy. If you look at the back of an energy drink, it's just a bunch of B vitamins. And so how it provides energy is because it actually makes it into usable form. So we talk about nutritional biochemistry, and the B vitamins is what makes that energy utilizable, for lack of a better term.
Nice.
Are there any specific supplements that you would recommend for someone who's trying to put on weight, like weight gain? Because I know they have like weight gainer, but
Right.
I don't really know what that consists of. It just says weight gain on the bottle, so that people buy it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So what I'm going to talk to you about is just knowing, again, we always talk about knowing where your sources come from. Supplements is an unregulated industry. Why? Because it brings so much money into the field. So books are the same way. People can publish books whether it's credible information or not. It's just you just need a publisher. So for these supplements, I saw a while back when before, when the internet was just, kind of like, dial up even, or it was just starting to get into like, higher speeds. But I remember in class, they were showing like something on the internet where people were just making stuff at the house in their home, and then the end product looked beautiful. It looked like something you can buy off of Walmart, you know, the labeling. But basically, when you're looking at a label, it's no different than food. Now, the only difference with supplements is that does it actually contain what it says it contains? So you're looking at third-party testing is what I'm trying to communicate. So some third-party testing would be like NSF, informed choice. Those are some examples of third-party testers. And so you always want to see that seal. So they'll have a seal on their supplement to let you know that it was third-party tested. And if it isn't
Okay.
third-party tested, hey, it's one of those things where it may or it may not. So you just don't know. It may have fillers like you're talking about, Jamie,
Yeah, just one of those toss-ups. You don't really know what's in it, what it's gonna do. And that's the same for pre-workout too. I know that I've heard of some people recently that are trying to make their own pre-workouts, like at home. Like, I don't have the energy to do that, man. I need pre-workout to make my pre-workout. Well, before we wrap this thing up, man, I wanted to ask what you feel like was the top recommendation, or what's the best piece of advice that you'd give someone who's trying to take control of their nutrition. We're in that January time where people are trying to get in the gym. It's a couple weeks into January, so some people done fell off. What would you tell someone who's trying to take control of their nutrition so that they can have a healthier lifestyle?
I would say to really understand your goals. A lot of the times, and I'm talking about like really specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time frame. We all heard it, SMART
Mm-hmm.
goals. So, for someone that's just like, oh, I just want to lose weight, or I just want to gain muscle, or I want to gain muscle and lose weight. It's like, you have short-term and long-term goals, and someone from physical therapy is like your long-term goal comes after your short-term goal. It's not the other way around. You know what I mean? So a lot of the times people, they have these goals that they're not realistic, or they're trying to jump the gun, and they're trying to put the cart before the horse. It doesn't work that
Mm-hmm.
way. And so my biggest piece of advice is just understanding your goals, and then just being realistic, and then also being gracious to yourself. A lot of times people give up when they see that skill on the weight, and they're like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
I'm not losing weight. Well, at the end of the day, your body composition is changing, you're getting muscle. And I talked to you guys about carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
Carbohydrates is your body's preferred source of energy. You're actually getting most of your calories from carbs. The normal person. And so, especially these endurance athletes. So, keto is not for everyone. But my biggest piece of advice is just really understanding your goals, and then just being gracious, man. So like I like to go use analogies, and I'll use this analogy like the strength training continuum. Like it's just kind of funny how, I'm not bashing anyone, but it's just understanding, what you're doing, what you're prescribing. So we're in the field of physical therapy. How many times do you see physical therapists say, "Oh, just do 2 sets of 20 or 3 sets of 10," or a personal trainer, and then they have no idea why they're prescribing 3 sets of 10 or 2 sets of 20. And it goes
Yeah.
back to the strength training continuum. So, like, if you're actually trying to look at when you're trying to hit muscular endurance, you're supposed to be hitting reps, like 12 to 20. If you're trying to hit hypertrophy, you're looking at reps of 6 to 12. And that's not even talking about the 1 rep max percentages. We're just talking about
Mm-hmm.
reps here, you know. And then you also look into the amount of rest that you take, the amount of sets. And so just understanding your goals and really understanding the content. Those would be my biggest advice for anyone who's trying to take control over their nutrition.
And I try to emphasize that too. When I was a personal trainer, I try to emphasize that you might not be seeing the number on the scale moving, but we are making progress. Your body fat percentage is dropping, and we're kind of replacing that weight with lean body mass, and that's why the number isn't changing. And a lot of people just can't get past that scale, man. They want to see the number move, and they become discouraged and they want to stop. And I always had to harp on them to just keep pushing. You are making progress until they can see it in the mirror. They won't realize that the scale doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, you said it best, Mark. Than looking at that long term goal when you got those short term goals, knock that out, then that'll get you to that long term. But yeah, that that shows you that there's still a lot of people dropping out of the gym from January 1st, thinking they're gonna get that long term goal in the first 3 weeks of the year. So short term
Yeah, it
goals
don't
really.
take long. All right, Mark. Well, we appreciate you taking some time, man. I know you're busy. Thanks for taking some time out of your weekend to talk to us. We really appreciate you being on.
Man, it's been an honor, man. Thanks for having me, Jamie and Robert. Appreciate it. It's been very enjoyable being on the show. And
Sure.
if there's ever another time to be back, I'd love it.
Yeah, absolutely. We might have to start a series because me and Robert were talking. There's so much stuff that goes into nutrition. There's so much to talk about, and we can't get it all in one episode. So we might start a nutrition series, and this might be the first episode of that series. So we might have to have you back on if you're willing.
Hey, sounds good, man. I'd love to.
All right, man. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of the Unleashed Performance Therapy Podcast. If you have anything you want us to talk about on the podcast, shoot us a DM at the Instagram at unleashed.tx. And y'all, be sweet to me. Scroll down to the bottom, give me a 5-star review, share the podcast with your family and friends. And until next time, peace.